So Louis, Victa, and me, we started this podcast about a year and a half ago. Would be like 2019, June 2019. And it was because of Anthony Bourdain. But we'll rewind a little bit, which is that we worked together many years ago. It was my second job in the industry at Bazaar Meat by Xandres. For me, that was a really, really, well, it's a big deal for anybody, but it was an especially big deal for me at the time because it was only my second job. And to be completely honest with you, I was only 6 months into the industry. So my mentor had, brought me into Gallagher's Steakhouse, which was at New York. Awesome New York steakhouse, just American, straightforward steak, potatoes, macaroni and cheese, like that kind of thing. And they did it really well. I moved up pretty quickly in there. I had a lot of cooking background from my childhood, but not professional cooking background. I'm just a hard worker and I really wanted to succeed. So I went really early and stayed really late and actually got to the point where my mentor had said, you know what, I think you need to move on because you've worked everything in this kitchen and you're ready to go. You're ready to keep going. Saw the opportunity as SLS was opening. There was a bunch of restaurants and I was like, are you serious? Xandres is opening like a brand new restaurant. And, he was on my radar for many years, even before I was in the business. And I thought, I'll just try, who knows, like probably have a very, very small chance, but I'll try. And was able to convince the chef to take me. So I was super excited. And when I started there, I was one of like 2 or 3 people that had close to the experience I had, but they still had more experience than me. I mean, literally had the experience of like a kid there that was 19. There was a kid that was 19 that, later on took under my wing because he's like so much younger than me. But like we had the same level of cooking experience. And then everybody else there was like, yeah, I worked at Picasso. I worked at Guy Savoy. I was from Robichon, like I'm from Bouchon. And I'm just like, 6 months at Gallagher's Steakhouse, like super quiet. So anyways, I worked my ass off there, got my ass kicked so many nights. In the business, they call it in the weeds. I was weeded so bad, so many nights, got yelled at, cried, got into fights, cried in the walk-in. Like it was just like the first couple months, they call it breaking you in. And so the chefs had kind of known that, and this is common, this is not just at Bazaar or anywhere, but like some of the sous chefs and cooks had found out like my little experience and they took it out on me. Like it was terrible. It was like ruining things that I had prepped and like throwing things away and like just the whole thing, yelling at you, like telling you're doing anything wrong, getting in your face, like all kinds of stuff. And you know what though? It's like basic training. Like I made it through it. Again, I would hide in the walk-in to cry, or I'd cry at home. But they never saw me cry. So there's that. They were like, really? You cried? Like, so that's good. Like there were moments literally when like I would go to like make bread in the oven and the sous chef would run in front of me to like take it out and be like, you're too slow. Like
the small things you don't even notice.
Yeah, just like crazy stuff. Or like you would cut like chives, and chives are like in fine dining are like you have to have a really sharp knife and you have to be you have to have really nice knife cuts not to ruin them. And at a place like Bazaar, it's like they've got to be perfect and exactly the same, and they're like like teeny tiny.
Fine.
And you do in a little 9-pan, it's about this big, and you'd cut the whole thing. So imagine that tiny in a whole 9-pan, it probably takes you, especially if you have no experience, like 20 minutes, and then they would look and be like, some of these are uneven. Garbage.
Confidence
like
killer.
Yeah. And then it's like in the beginning, I was like, are you serious? Like talking back. And then I learned very quickly, which I needed to do, that you don't talk back to a chef. You do it and you shut up and you keep going, So I learned a lot of lessons, hard ones, and learned humility, which is something that everybody needs to learn, especially in a professional kitchen, just how to take orders, because you don't realize it until you become a chef. I think a lot of the time that like it's so necessary to keep everybody in line in order to get stuff done and to get it done well, especially in a busy kitchen. So at the time I was really upset. I was sad. I was angry, all those kinds of negative emotions. But in hindsight, it was like the best thing that could happen to me. So one of the people in the kitchen who never gave me any shit, but was like way more experienced than me was Louie. And we became friendly. And I found out that she, her passion was photography. She had a background in television, but like technical, like behind the scenes. She worked at another station, like on the floor, as like a stage person, production assistant, like different jobs like that are behind the scenes. Had a degree in AV, and I was like, this is like completely opposite of me. But I was like, there's always been the dream, which I had from the beginning, which was one day when I'm good enough and I feel like I know enough to do this, and I'll never know enough, to be honest with you, like to be what I really want to be, which is like awesome, awesome, awesome chef. I'll never be there. So that's fine. I'm okay with that. But I realized and figured that at one point I would be ready to move back into media, but with the food background. And so that was always an idea. So we would have these like dream discussions when it was not busy, as in hospitality, there are these moments when it's like slow, or like it's a slow night or whatever it is. And like, there's a lot of time to get to know your coworkers. And so I learned that about her. And then she learned about my background. She only knew like, oh, she used to be in the TV business, but there was a passion that I had for storytelling. And she's like, one day we should just do a show together. And we were both like, yeah, let's do a show together, And then we went on our separate ways. Like after I left, I actually moved to Los Angeles to go work with Susan Feniger and Mary C. Milligan through the James Beard Foundation mentorship. When I left, we still were like keeping in touch and talking about like a possibility of one day doing something together. So then 2 things happened. One, which was like big deal to me, was fast forward to me working at Joe's Stone Crab at Caesars. I had a really bad accident and had 2 labrum tears in my shoulder. I don't know if you're familiar with labrum tears, but like it's like a baseball injury. So when I fell, I slid on some mashed potatoes, which is kind of hilarious, but not really, you know what I mean? But things happen. So it was at the end of my shift and I was taking inventory, which chefs have to do. There's a lot of paperwork involved with being a chef, maybe even more so than cooking when you get to that, management level. So I'm just doing paperwork, of course. It's not like something that actually is like dangerous. I'm holding a clipboard and I slip on mashed potatoes and go flying. And I did a little sliding into home thing with my arm, which is not smart, but I was trying to protect my head. And because I did that, I separated my shoulder, labrum tear, front and back. So I had to have a major surgery. And I was out for a really long time.
Yeah, that's like a 9-month injury.
It was awful. It ended up being like a little bit more than a year. So it was like rotator cuff and like 2 labrum tears. So I was like, couldn't do anything. I couldn't do the job that, by the way, I like changed careers to do.
Oh, it's heartbreaking.
And I was just like fucked. And then the man that both Louis and I like looked up to, Anthony Bourdain, both of us, we had this in common where he was so interesting to us because he was a chef journalist, which even though in his lifetime he never considered himself to be a journalist, he was clearly a journalist. He was telling stories about chefs and cooks and culture, traveling around the world, doing his shows. And we just were both obsessed with him. Like we both thought, this is like something that we want to do one day, because she was visual and she was like into photography and like she was a major traveler. And then I was a journalist. So, and we both had the food background. So that happened. It was an awful day for us. So we talked about it some more, like what can we do to fill in the space? Obviously, we're not Anthony Bourdain. We don't claim to be, we will never be, but what is something that we can do to fill in the space? So then, as it came to the 1-year anniversary in 2019 in June, Eric Rayper, the famous La Bernardine chef, and Jose Xandres, our old boss, our jefe, they asked for hashtag Bourdain Day on social media. And it was like maybe like a month before his birthday, maybe even a little bit longer. And we thought, you know what? Like, you have some time right now, which Louie at the time was like working less jobs than she works now. And I definitely have time because holy crap, I can't do anything. Like I literally was having a hard time. Like I couldn't put on my bra. Like, so let's
Oh,
be like, to be like honest, you know what I mean? I couldn't reach behind me. It was just like a terrible time in my life physically. I was like, well, I can write, I can talk, I could produce. So she's like, why don't we do a podcast? And we do it in memory of Anthony Bourdain because Hefe, which is what we call him, our boss, Hefe, even though he's not our boss anymore, is asking us to do something in memory of Anthony Bourdain that's positive, you know? And I was like, a podcast? Like, and honestly, I was like, I had listened to like one podcast before that, and she was like totally into podcasts. So I just started like listening to the podcasts, listening to different podcasts, especially food ones. And I was like, oh, I totally get like what this is. You know, it's like a very niche market, which is perfect because we're talking about something very specific. And it made sense. Like our whole idea was filling in some sort of gap that Anthony Bourdain had left behind, which was giving chefs and people in the hospitality industry a voice. So that's how we came up with the idea of two sharp chefs and a microphone, which my husband named. It's in reference to two turntables and a microphone.